As educators guided by solution-focused wellbeing practices, Kathryn is energised by change and creation, optimism and uncertainty. Dedicated to improving the wellbeing of others, her work with individuals, organisations, educational institutions identify potential for increased motivation and wellbeing. With over 20 years of professional experience across corporate, educational and NFP sectors, she delivers coaching and development through proactive and meaningful interactions, educating others in leadership, wellbeing and careers. Her value is clear through local and global response to her work. Currently, the Director of Wellbeing Australia, expert in education and wellbeing for ACPI and Directors of Turning Point Consulting and a Centre of Excellence in Leadership, Change and Wellbeing. With a devotion to education, she has worked in human resources, leadership, coaching, working across K-12, department, Catholic, independent schools with leadership staff, students, community to embed positive professional development. She emphasises resilience, empowerment, motivation and engagement. Receiving recognition for her work in educational leadership with a focus of transition for staff and students, she was awarded an honorary fellowship from the Teachers Guild of New South Wales and a career management fellowship from ICCI. Please welcome Kathryn Taylor.
Is that possible? Can you all hear me okay? Am I on? Yes? No? There we are. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Fred. Look, when I was asked to talk today, I was trying to think, how can I add some value that complements what we've been talking about, but also provides to you in your roles. So Fred shared very beautifully there exactly what I'm doing. My background and focus is working in industry and then bringing that back into education. So for those of you who know me, you know I don't stand still very well. You also know I'm very discussion-based. So Fred has challenged me today to not pose questions and do what I naturally do. But I wanted to give you the chance to sort of step to the side of what we've been talking about this morning. So we've talked about policy, we've talked about data, we've talked about what's happening broadly and seen some student examples. What I'm hoping to give you is that connection, that response to the senior leaders that you're working with, or the parents that are challenging you, or the students that are challenging you in your role, to think, well, how can you justify, provide examples, but really support what they're looking for and needing in a way that's meaningful to you. Personally, I'm hoping to give you a bit of a reflection as well, so that you walk away with something so that you feel that you are in a better space and you have been able to reflect on you. So today I'm very much sitting in two hats. The first hat is with Wellbeing Australia, and that is where we are focused from a national perspective, but doing things globally as well. My role is focused on education, but also first response. You guys are all first responders because we're in the firing line the whole time, yeah? And so looking at solution-based practices there. What I also want to do is then talk to you about how that links through to industry. So that's my thought process. Does that sound useful for the next sort of half hour? Yeah, you still with me? Is the sugar running low yet? A little bit low, okay, work with me. So just to get us started, when we're talking about careers, all too often we talk about that distance. We talk about where we're going, where people need to be, where they should be thinking about. The current situation is that we are carrying a bit of stress and overlay from the last 3 years, 2 to 3 years. Anyone here feeling a little fatigued? Anyone school or community you're working in feeling a little fatigued? Anyone got irate parents, exhausted parents coming at you trying to solve problems for the kids that they've got in their house, won't get out of bed, won't come back to school, or are feeling like this is all a waste of time? Yeah, personally, as a parent, as much as a teacher, that's really what we need to catch. We need to recognise how critical wellbeing is for us, but is for our youth that we are working with. The beauty of vocational education is how well it interfaces into what wellbeing practices are. When I talk about wellbeing, I'm very, very specific. Wellbeing is about managing life's ups and downs. Quite often when we talk about wellbeing in schools, we are talking about an issue, we're talking about mental health challenges, we're talking about depression, anxiety, cutting, all of those sorts of things. Wellbeing has ups and wellbeing has downs. We need to be managing both of those. So what I want to give you just to start with is a concept of what is wellbeing, and I want you to reflect personally on where you're at for your well-being, but also try and put yourself in one of your students, maybe one of those students that's challenging you a little more than the average, and just consider how their well-being may be structured. So there's 5 elements I'm going to take you through. Reflect on them personally, but also take it as one of those students and see what you think from that side. So the first and the most critical component of well-being, and this is Tom Rath data that's from Clifton's, and it's the Clifton's strengths that I use a lot in my work. First and most critical element to our well-being, crazy idea, our purpose. What gets us out of bed every morning? What is it that we do the bulk of our time? So if I am working 4 or 5 days as an educator, that is my purpose. If I am a student at school full-time, that is my purpose or my career. This is the number one impact on everything that happens. If I am miserable in that school, if I am miserable in that job, everything else in my well-being becomes impacted. Anyone worked in one of those lovely toxic environments? How did that ripple through your life? Yeah? Okay, so that's the same for our students. If our students are there going, there is no point, I'm not valued here, I'm not smart enough. I hear that all too often. I'm not smart enough, they don't get me, it doesn't work for me. Everything else ripples throughout their life. That purpose is key to everything. The second component, this is the physical, and I'm invited to a lot of wellbeing conferences and events, and usually I follow a hot yoga person. I didn't know that was such a popular thing, but hot yoga is apparently very popular. And cooking, that's the other thing. This is not what physical well-being is. Physical well-being is us feeling safe. Do we feel safe where we work? So that toxic bullying, harassment culture, students or yourselves may be experiencing. Do I feel that there's clean air for me to breathe, fresh water for me to drink? Am I getting quality sleep? Is anyone working with students who are up gaming till 2 a.m? Yeah, they're delightful. Yeah, so that's really hard where we're breaking that cycle. Quality sleep and rest. Yes, I am eating decent food. So there's vegetables and fruit in my diet, crazy idea, and I'm getting quality water as well. The physical piece is quite broad. This piece is what we underutilise and we don't always connect. A lot of the students that are interested in vocational are actually really, really focused on fitness, are really focused on cooking, are focused on those other aspects. We don't always connect those dots, but that is key to their well-being. The third one is social. What I see in a lot of my work, I tend to get referred students who are highly disengaged, families who are over the school that they're working in, or schools that are struggling as a whole to manage what's happening and how we can engage our community. What I notice is the social impact is critical. Social is quality social relationships. I feel understood and connected, I feel valued, and I feel that I belong. This is online and face-to-face in terms of those relationships. That piece is one of the biggest ones that we have as the ripple effect. In our careers, social becomes networking. From a vocational point of view, I create an entirely new social network that connects to my value and purpose, but gives me that sense of belonging that suddenly someone is recognising those good things about me. So the social piece, whereas I may be derailed, anyone got those students that there's a big pack of them, they all hate school or they're all disengaged or disconnected, and they drag each other along, but they're excellent individually, like really, really intelligent, capable people, yeah? That's where we need them to sort of get that piece that they are in control and give them those new networks. The financial piece of well-being for us at different phases in our life becomes really important. I was joking before, people often say to me when they're coming up to retirement, I want that perfect part-time job that's going to get me $2 million in the next 5 years. Yeah? If we had that, we'd all want it, right? So absolutely no question. Financial is not me having heaps of money. Financial is me being able to live within the means that I have, feeling comfortable in the financial commitments I have. It's being able to know that when that bill comes, I have the money to actually pay for that bill. A lot more of the youth that I am seeing in schools at the moment are carers for their parents or for their family members. I've got one beautiful girl that I'm working with who is actually now the guardian to her 3 siblings, one of which has very, very high autism and ADHD and is nonverbal. She sat her HSC 2 years ago while caring for those children and providing for them. Now that's a financial pressure many of us can't imagine and expect. The other piece that we're seeing, and Daryl and Kelly mentioned that whole financial pressure of doing vocational, it's also that understanding of how I can make money from it. A lot of the parents will say to me, no, 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 we need them to go to uni because we need them to get a good income. Anyone heard that before? Yeah, we need them to earn more money. So I'm sure I do what you guys do, and I explain, well, hang on a minute, if they start on their vocational path now, and they go through and they complete this certificate by the end of year 12, and they continue their studies while working, by the time they're in their early 20s, they have enough money for a deposit for a unit, qualifications for the degree, didn't need the ATAR because they can now pathway through if they do want to do a bachelor's degree, and you know what? Someone else has paid for their qualifications. And suddenly parents go, what? Yeah? What are you talking about? How does that work? So this understanding about that link between the financial pressure and looking at the solutions that we can provide is taking that off. That physical piece, one thing I forgot to mention is the ongoing physical or mental challenges. So I'm working with a lot of students who have very high mental health difficulties, extreme depression, extreme anxiety, some recovering from addiction, a lot of long-term or chronic health conditions, so that link means I can't do a full load at school, but what I can do is pathway through what I'm wanting to do to progress. So we're using that vocational as a way of continuing and completing the education, but giving that really solid purpose that takes that individual away from their illness and gives them something constructive to move forward with. So suddenly we're looking at hope, and we are actually making some money. That independence is key. The last piece is something that we don't always focus on, and this is community. This is how do I connect in a way that is greater than myself. This is our giving nature, and we are wired as humans for this, but it's the one most people, particularly adults, say to me, I don't have time for that, yeah? It's my volunteering, it's my charity, it's my community, it's my giving back where there's no actual, value as in a money piece that comes back to me, but it is quite critical. This piece in a lot of the work we've noticed with Wellbeing Australia is connected highly with our sense of spirituality, and that is not religion, that is a sense of something greater than me. I am here for something that is purposeful, but I'm here for something that is beyond just me, making ends meet in who I am and what I'm doing. So that community, while the students are at school, we say is the school. We see that we're providing them a positive community to be part of. But what if they don't feel part of that community? What if they don't feel like it gets them and it is positive from that side? That volunteering piece, which can link to our vocational pathways, actually can give them that sense of self. So those 5 elements, if you sit there and you reflect, as I say, for you personally, and then you reflect on that student or that youth that you're working with, just take a second to consider which one would you say is in most need? Which one do you feel is not satisfied at this point for you? And does that compare, or how does that compare for that student or that youth you may be working with? Just give you a second to consider that. Can everyone identify something for them? Hopefully it's not all money, because usually I find people go straight to money, the financial piece. But consider what that is and consider how you can be doing something. If you then relate that back to the youth, it's fascinating how often it is aligned. The number one thing people will say to me is impacting them is that first one of that purpose. That just feeling like what I'm doing is not connecting with me anymore. And the way we look at it is to start to think differently about, well, what are these things we're considering and how is it fitting with us from a whole perspective? There's a tool that I use that's called motivational mapping, and I use it with youth because I find youth struggle to talk about skills. Have you noticed this? They really struggle to talk about what those skills are that they bring. So when we talk about vocation, when we talk about careers, they're not necessarily clear on what those skills are that they bring and how connected they are to who they are. This is a resource that helps us to assess where does our energy come from? What is it that drives and motivates us? What is it that drains us? And we all have these 9 motivators, but they vary. Where we're at a particular point in life, at a particular stage, at a particular situation, these will vary depending on how we are feeling and where we're at. The tool for us is incredibly useful because instead of having to have 5 or 6 conversations to work out what was the root cause or problem, we actually get to the point that we're going, this is where the challenge is. So I'm using this with students from year 5 up to year 12. We use it as a career tool and decision-making and discussion tool for students to start to understand what are these skills and how can it connect across. Now, in a vocational setting, it's really, really fascinating. So if I was to profile, and this is the data that we've had from educational leaders and vocational professionals that we've been working with, the three main areas we are motivated, why we go into education and what we deliver to. Number one, we like a sense of stability and regular sort of nature. We like the system of the school term or the structure to it, and we like to know what's expected of us. That stability is important. It gives us a sense of calm, gives us a sense of understanding, and just gives us that framework that we live within. Doesn't mean it's rigid, but it means we know how to organise and order ourselves. The second one is the expert, and that means what I'm passionate about, I really want to be the best at. I'm fascinated in learning. I want to gather more information and knowledge. I want to keep that growth mind happening, but for what I'm passionate about, which is why we tend to go for particular areas. The third one is the searcher. Search is about purpose and meaning. How many people joined education because they wanted to make a difference to others, they wanted to impact the world or other people and help them to be a better sense of themselves? Anyone here driven to education for that? Yep. Huge, absolutely huge in education. Education, nursing, medicine, those sorts of areas, very, very strong. So that's the three common and really dominant ones for educators. Interested in seeing the 3 or 4 for those disengaged kids I work with? Yeah? Okay. Comparison is, first, friend. You know, we talked about social well-being. Friend is about a sense of belonging and connection. They do not feel a connection. They do not feel that they belong, and they do not feel like people get them. There's one kid that I'm working with in a school, and everybody told me she is so bubbly. Everyone loves her. She's got so many friends. We profiled her. She rated herself 1 out of 10. That's really, really low in terms of feeling satisfied in that area. When we started the conversation, she said, I don't feel like I've got one friend in this school. Yet the school's perception was, she's floating around, she's got this, not a problem, let's ignore her, she's happy days, yeah? That friend piece flows on. Worked with a fabulous guy who got expelled from school. He was fascinating though. And he got expelled from school because he got in with the wrong group. And this is what I hear a lot from boys more than girls. He was in year 8. They got into some bad stuff. He didn't have the courage to say, no, I don't want to be involved. He got caught in the mix of it all and got expelled. Yeah? So when we were having the conversations, he was able to explain to his father, as a result of our conversation around this profiling, that I totally get it, but that's why I now want to pick a school where I don't know anyone, where I get to start those relationships over again and I get to go clean. Because you know what? It's easier for me to do that than to try and fix the mess that I've got myself into here. Particularly around year 10 and 11, I find a lot of the guys will say to me, I can't get out of this group now. Have you heard that before? Yeah? So this is where us doing an SBAT or a vocational pathway gets them out of that group. It gives them a new group without them having to go, I'm not dealing with you guys anymore. But that social piece is key because that's my sense of self, and they're at that point where it's really important in terms of building. The other side, and you'll notice a lot of blue for these guys that are disengaged, right? The first one is relationships, so it's people, how I connect and think of the past. The second one's achievement. This is what we want to teach in schools. Action orientation, what have I got to do today? Focus on tasks. The last one is what you guys are about. What's the future? What's the aspiration? What can be? Our disengaged kids fall very, very heavily here. Interestingly, heavily on searcher, just like us. And they'll often say, when am I going to ever have to analyse Shakespeare? I don't care about Shakespeare. When am I ever going to have to use this information in the real world? That why piece is really, really important to them. The beauty with vocational studies and workplace learning is there's a direct connection to purpose. Even if I start doing IT and I decide that is not for me, I still have an understanding about why it's not for me and how it can connect across. So that purpose piece means we're heightening that focus. Throughout all the major incidences in our history, so World War I, Twin Towers, definitely the pandemic, all of us have a heightened sense of purpose. Suddenly what matters to us is what's real, yeah? That is spiking in all ages at the moment. The second one is our spirit. This is like a teacher's nightmare. This is me, I'm high spirit. Freedom, independence, leave me alone, yep? Very, very comfortable in my own space. Doesn't mean I don't like people. I love people, but I don't like being told what to do. I notice that in a lot of our vocational kids, they're brilliant independently if they love what they're doing, but gosh, they cause pain for others if they don't, yeah? That freedom, that spirit is give me some sense of control. Give me some sense of I'm deciding what this is about. And our last one, which is up the top here, again, fabulous if I'm into the classic art or something where people see it as a creative subject, but creator is doing things differently. Don't ask me to be a defender and do things exactly the same way. Let me do it differently. Let me be creative. Let me be out of the box in how I do it. So creator, even though it has an image of paint, is not just painting. It's your innovative digital people. It's your creative thinkers around business concepts. It's your entertainment students who know exactly how to structure things to get a much better event to happen. It's doing things differently, so very much about new and different. So when we look at their profiles, they're actually quite different to the bulk of the educator profiles. Interesting? Yeah? Can you see some of those themes in the students that you're working with? Yeah? This is where I'd normally say, do you have questions? But I'm not allowed to. So the reason I share this with you is this is a fascinating and massive tool to use with those people in your school who do not get the value of vocational. And I hear a lot of people saying, we've made progress, and I totally, totally agree we've made progress. But from my experience, we're still facing barriers and we're still needing to re-educate people depending where we are, that this is fantastic in so many ways. So I want to give you a summary. I want to give you a couple of tips that you can feed into your school strategic plan. You can feed into, business promotional sort of information from your department or conversations you're having with students, staff, or families. It's a lot of the information that I go back to as to why. So the reason that this is critical, the reason we want to have conversations about vocational learning and we want to apply these things into our school context comes back to really foundational aspects of our well-being, of our mental health strategies, and very much around how we help people from that career piece ongoing. First is a sense of belonging. I belong to a club, a group, a sense of a community that get me. That can be one other person. For a lot of my students, it's actually their supervisor or their teacher of the course. You know how those beautiful videos, those kids were all going, and I love my teacher and I get them? You don't get that for all students. These are the kids who feel connected. They feel that someone else actually understands them. The communities that quite often we will have people working in from that workplace setting are the ones who get them. So they may not go to them regularly, but it does change it. A lot of my guys on SBATs say that that has changed the whole world of their education because one day a week, they are important. They're valued and they're understood and they're really involved. So that's key. So that value proposition comes through. This is the second one, and we don't value it because there's no mark against it, but self-esteem. Most of the issues with wellbeing that I come across and most of the issues with students being disengaged comes back to me not having a sense of self. If I don't have a sense of self and I don't have a sense of self-value, then that ripples into everything else I do because I may seek attention or I may try and deflect and make other people see me how I want them to see me because I have an element of control in it. So this piece is, hang on a minute, I actually am worth something and it's connected to something that's purposeful. Back to that searcher, there's some why factor to where that's sort of going. The real world outcomes, and this is from an employment perspective, so I work with students right through to adults. The biggest gap with youth at the moment when they finish school is a lack of experience. Vocational guys have that. The lack of experience. I have people who are finishing 4- and 5-year university degrees with no work experience, never had a job. Can you believe that? I can't believe that. That's just beyond my brain. I can't comprehend that. So they've never had a job because they don't want to work in retail because what's the point of that? And they'll say to me, well, I'm not going to apply for Coles or something like that because no one wants to see that on a resume. When we look at the companies, when we look at who's hiring across all industries, we want people who have been in customer-facing environments or situations where they have been autonomous and had to take control of situations, take initiative. What do we ask kids to do on work experience and work placement? We ask them to take initiative, to very quickly come up to speed and learn how to fit in and be valuable in that community. They have to follow instructions from people they don't know. They're working in busy, fast-paced, different environments to be productive and constructive, and they are doing practical, hands-on skills that apply to all different jobs. So all of a sudden, their resume is pretty schmick, yeah? They've got that solid experience. What we look for when we are hiring, and this is even for guys who are coming out of school and looking at scholarships and those sorts of things, so even trying to get that pathway through, and we can be doing that from a vocational path, we are looking for people who have bothered to do something and have that energy and enthusiasm without being spoon-fed. They're able to do it without us having to guide them through every step. So these pieces are really, really key. So those industry skills of being punctual, actually turning up. I cannot explain to students how important it is to turn up. I had one who didn't go because it was raining, so they just stayed home because it was raining. I had another one who slept in, so they missed the bus, so they just didn't go. You know, this is the mindset that we have, and they get their parents to call. So if you get a tip, tell parents to back right out from work placement. It's a much better thing. And the last thing is an understanding of what possible futures could be. So I suddenly can understand, hang on, if I'm tossing up between, say, construction and electro and plumbing, or hairdressing and beauty, I'm tossing up between business skills and maybe IT, I can compare them in the safety of the community I feel connected and valued and I have support with, and I can work out how to move that forward. I had one girl who did hospitality and veterinary, animal studies rather, because she wanted to create a cafe where animals were welcomed. Genius. I'll go to that cafe. Absolutely genius. Her school would not support her, and so she ended up leaving the school and finishing through TAFE Pathways because she was going, but I know exactly what I want to do, and this is working, and she was putting all that work through. So for me, it's that, well, what is our hope? What is our next step, and what is of most value to us? This hope is something we cannot undervalue, because when we come from a school system saying, but this is the structure you work through and you need to fit into it, we're forgetting the motivators that are coming through from most of our youth are actually about, but why? And so we want to try and connect that through. I'm wrapping up very quickly, Fred. So those are my tips for what to bring into those strategic plans, those conversations, those parents' nights. Definitely conversations at different levels. I'm presenting to principals and senior leadership in education on exactly this, so we can get that support at those higher levels to get advocacy for you guys. So my top tips, and these are things I say to kids, that these are your survival tips, and I'm a big believer vocational gives us all of these. So this is my sort of takeaway component. An opportunity to back themselves. As uncomfortable, as scary, as weird as it feels to walk on and do a work placement or to try to construct or build or do whatever I'm doing, the opportunity to back themselves in something practical, something that applies to that real world. The chance to fail and realise I've failed, but I've learnt from it and I will keep going. How often do we fail? Yeah? You've got to fail to succeed. So the opportunity to go, the failing is not actually an F on my report card. The failing is the learning and the growth of how I have become a better professional in that space. It gives us the chance to step away from that toxic space, be it relationships, be it the school I don't feel that I'm connected or understanding, whatever it is. For some of them, it's their family. I have quite a lot of kids actually now coming from alcoholic or domestic situations. They're working and doing vocational to be able to move out once they actually finish school. So getting themselves that next space, creating those forever networks. If these kids are reliable and responsible, they will get work from it. They get that next casual job or that next opportunity. So those things set them up well for their next phase. Would you guys agree? Yeah? They are my contact details. On your table, there are 3 postcards. One has a little sparkler. That's the information about youth maps if you want to contact me and find out a little bit more or test it out yourselves. The other one has a picture of a beach. That is my card to give you information on how to contact me. And the third one has beautiful sunflowers, and it is Wellbeing Australia's postcard so that there's information on how you can contact us. And we do a summit in September, which is free for all educators, which is really about protecting your wellbeing from that side. Has that been useful? Yeah? All good. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathryn. Don't go too far. Really appreciate all the resources and how you articulate your beautiful presentations. A small token of our appreciation for being here and for contributing once again to our Vet in Schools Forum. So thank you, Kathryn.